His lawyer leaned closer and whispered just 5 words. Only 5. In that instant, Vincent's smug, self-satisfied face, the same face I had looked at across the breakfast table for 15 years, turned completely white. His hands began to tremble. The papers he had been so eager to sign shook violently in his grasp. And for the first time in 3 years, I smiled. But I am getting ahead of myself. I need to start from the beginning, because you have to understand how everything led to this moment. You need to understand how a woman everyone believed had lost her mind was actually playing the longest, most patient game of her life. My name is Alexis Dunst. I am 34 years old, and until 3 months ago, I was married to Vincent Mercer. 15 years of marriage. Longer than most Hollywood relationships, longer than the existence of some small countries, and certainly longer than my patience should have lasted. But I am a stubborn woman. I inherited that trait from my grandmother. I met Vincent when I was 17. I had graduated from high school early, not because I was a genius, but because I was practical, driven, and desperate to leave my parents' house. I took a job at a law firm as a file clerk. Minimum wage, endless paper cuts, but it was my job. By the time I was 18, I had worked my way up to legal assistant. I was good with details, good with numbers, and especially good at keeping my mouth shut while keeping my eyes open. Vincent was 24 when we met at a client event. He was charming, ambitious, and endlessly talking about building a real estate empire. He spoke about the future as if it already belonged to him, as if success was simply waiting for him to claim it. He said he was going to build something extraordinary. I told him I could help him file the paperwork. Romance, right? We married when I was 19. Our son, Tyler, was born when I was 20. I continued working part-time at the law firm while raising our child, building my retirement account, and saving every extra dollar I could. My grandmother always told me that a woman should have her own money. Not secret money, she always clarified, just her own. Something no one could ever take away. When I was 23, Vincent's business finally began to take off. He asked me to leave the law firm and work for him full-time. He needed someone to manage the books, handle clients, coordinate contractors, someone he could trust completely. So I became everything, without pay. I was the bookkeeper, the office manager, the client liaison, the interior decorator for model homes, the marketing coordinator, the event planner. I did all of it while raising Tyler, running our household, and somehow keeping everyone fed and functioning. My official title was wife. My unofficial title was everything else. For 11 years, I poured myself into building Vincent's dream. And for 11 years, he received all the credit, all the awards, all the recognition. At industry events, I was introduced as Vincent's wife. At celebrations, he thanked his team, his mentors, his vision, but somehow never found the time to thank me. Somewhere along the way, things began to shift. He started making decisions without consulting me. He began staying late at work more often. He criticized small things, the way I dressed, the meals I cooked, my so-called lack of ambition. Lack of ambition? I was running his entire back office for free, while raising his son and keeping his life organized. But yes, apparently, I was not ambitious enough. Then, 3 months ago, he said it. He came home on a Tuesday evening. I was cooking dinner, his favorite meal, because apparently I am very good at unappreciated effort. He sat me down at the kitchen table. His expression was not sad, not apologetic, just cold and businesslike. He told me he wanted a divorce. Then he said he wanted the house, the cars, the business, everything. And I could keep Tyler. He said it the way someone orders from a menu. He would take the assets. I could have the child, as if our 15-year-old son were a leftover item he was generously allowing me to keep. I stared at him. 15 years of marriage ended at our kitchen table, between the salt shaker and the butter dish, as if I were just another object he was discarding. What I did not know then, what I would not discover until later, was that Vincent had been planning this for months. He already had a lawyer. He had documents prepared, settlements drafted, timelines mapped out. While I was meal prepping and scheduling his dentist appointments, he was building his exit strategy. I had been blindsided by the man I trusted with everything. The very next day, Vincent's mother showed up. Lorraine Mercer arrived with her perfectly styled hair and her carefully practiced expression of sympathy. She took my hand and told me that I should have tried harder to keep her son happy. She explained that men have needs, speaking to me as if she were patiently teaching something complicated to a slow child. Her advice on marriage was ironic, considering her own husband spent 7 days a week on the golf course specifically to avoid being in the same room with her. But somehow, I was still the problem. That first week passed in a blur. Vincent moved me into the guest room. He had documents drafted, settlements proposed, and timelines established. Everything moved quickly, and I felt as though I were drowning. To everyone watching from the outside, I looked like a woman whose life had collapsed, a wife discarded after 15 years of service, a victim who never saw it coming. What no one knew was that I had already discovered something 3 years earlier, something buried deep within Vincent's own financial records, something he believed was hidden forever, and I had been quietly preparing ever since. Within a week of announcing the divorce, Vincent had taken complete control. The guest room became my permanent space in what had once been my home. My closet was reduced from a walk-in to 2 small sections he generously allowed me to keep. The message was clear. This was no longer my house. 2 weeks later, he began bringing her around. Her name was Brittany Sawyer. She was 27 years old and worked at his company. Of course she did. She had the kind of Instagram-perfect appearance that never seemed to fade. Blonde highlights, flawless nails, and yoga pants that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. She walked into my kitchen as if she owned it. She wore my apron, my grandmother's apron, while making smoothies in my blender. She was younger than my marriage, younger than my favorite handbag, but she made excellent smoothies, so I suppose that counted for something. Vincent paraded her around like a trophy. They sat on my couch, watched my television, and ate from my plates. He put his arm around her right in front of me, treating me like furniture, like I had already disappeared. The humiliation escalated quickly. First, he canceled my personal credit card, explaining that we needed to separate finances. Then he canceled the joint card. Soon after, he suggested that I should consider finding somewhere else to stay while everything was being sorted out. I was being asked to leave my own home. Lorraine came over again, this time to help me pack. By help, I mean she went through my belongings and decided what I deserved to keep. Old clothes were acceptable. Some family photos were allowed. She hesitated over my grandmother's recipe box, as if she were considering claiming it for herself. What I was not permitted to take was anything of value. Jewelry Vincent had purchased during our marriage, furniture I had chosen, anything considered a marital asset. She explained calmly that Vincent was entitled to those things. She packed my belongings into garbage bags, not boxes. Garbage bags, as if I were trash being taken out. Throughout all of this, there was one person I believed I could still trust. Her name was Diane Holloway. We had been friends since high school, 20 years of shared history through relationships, breakups, marriages, and children. She was the first person I called after Vincent announced the divorce. She was supportive, constantly checking in, always ready to listen. She came over with wine and let me cry on her shoulder. She told me I deserved better. She said Vincent was making a terrible mistake, but something felt wrong. Vincent seemed to know my plans before I shared them with anyone else. When I told Diane I was considering fighting for the house, Tyler came home the next day saying his father told him it would never work. When I mentioned to Diane that I was looking at apartments in a specific neighborhood, Vincent commented shortly after that the area was far too expensive for me. Then everything clicked. Looking back, I should have seen it years earlier. The way Diane lit up whenever Vincent entered the room, the way she laughed at his jokes, just a little too hard, and complimented him just a little too often. She always asked about him first. How was Vincent doing? How was the business? Was Vincent happy? She had been in love with my husband for 15 years. And Vincent, a man who collected admirers the way some people collect stamps, knew exactly how to use that. He made her feel special and important. He likely suggested that something might happen between them after the divorce. He gave her just enough hope to keep her loyal. My best friend had become his informant. 20 years of friendship traded for flirting and empty promises. If she was going to sell me out, she could have at least asked for a better price. But the worst part of all of this was not Vincent. It was not Lorraine. It was not even Diane. The worst part was Tyler. My son saw everything. He saw the girlfriend in our home. He saw his grandmother packing my belongings into garbage bags. He saw the way his father looked at me as if I were nothing. And Vincent was working on him, slowly and deliberately. He told Tyler that I was the one making things difficult, that he only wanted everyone to be happy, that I was dragging things out unnecessarily, that he was trying to be fair, but I refused to cooperate. Tyler began to pull away from me. He was not angry, just distant and confused. He did not know who to believe. I could lose the house. I could lose the money. I could lose everything I had spent 15 years helping to build. But watching my son look at me as though I were the problem that was the wound that truly cut deep, that was when I hired a lawyer. The lawyer I hired was Nina Castellano. She was 52 years old, sharp, direct, and completely intolerant of nonsense. She came highly recommended by my former law firm. After reviewing my situation, she laid out what she believed was the only logical plan. I had helped build the business, she said. I was legally entitled to half of everything: the house, the company, the accounts. She wanted to fight. I listened to her carefully and then asked a question that made her stare at me as if I had suddenly begun speaking a different language. What if I did not want to fight? She assumed I was broken, depressed, too exhausted to stand up for myself. She had no idea. I moved with Tyler into a small apartment, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen barely larger than the pantry in my old house. Half of our boxes did not even fit. They sat stacked in the corner of Tyler's room, a physical reminder of how far we had fallen. Meanwhile, Vincent filled social media with photos of his new life, new chapter, new energy, blessed. His mother commented publicly about how happy she was for him and how he deserved joy. My sister called me furious, insisting I needed a ruthless lawyer and should take Vincent for everything he was worth. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone believed they knew what I should do. Everyone thought I had given up. Everyone was wrong. There is a strange power in being underestimated. When people think you are defeated, they stop watching you. They stop being careful. They stop protecting their secrets. That is when you learn everything. I had been carrying my secret for 3 years. 3 years earlier, on a random Tuesday night, Vincent had been working late again. By then, he was always working late, though I did not yet understand what that truly meant. I was reviewing the company's books, reconciling accounts, doing the invisible work that kept his business functioning. That was when I noticed something strange. A transfer to an unfamiliar account, then another, then a pattern. Money flowing out of our accounts into places I did not recognize. I kept digging. I stayed up until 3 in the morning, following the trail. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Vincent had been taking loans against everything we owned. Our house, the house I believed we owned outright, had 3 mortgages. The original loan was $400,000. A second mortgage of $350,000 had been taken out 4 years earlier. A third mortgage of another $350,000 had been added 2 years after that. The total owed on the house was approximately $1.1 million. Its actual market value was about $850,000. We were more than $250,000 underwater. The business was in even worse condition. Lines of credit were maxed out at $200,000. There were back taxes totaling $85,000. Vendor debts of $120,000. Equipment loans of $75,000. The thriving company Vincent bragged about at every party was drowning in nearly $500,000 of debt. Even the cars were not real assets. All 3 were leased, with large balloon payments approaching. We did not own anything. We simply had extremely expensive monthly obligations. I sat in my kitchen at 3 in the morning, surrounded by printed statements, and did the math. Total debt was close to $1.9 million. Total real asset value was perhaps $1.6 million. We were at least $300,000 in the negative. Then I asked the obvious question: where had all the money gone? Over the following weeks, I traced every transaction I could find. The picture that emerged was devastating. $180,000 lost in cryptocurrency investments, $75,000 lost to gambling, an apartment I had never known existed, rented for a woman I had never heard of, costing $60,000 in rent and furnishings. There were also lifestyle expenses that never reached our household. Luxury watches, suits, private trips I was never invited on. Another $85,000 gone. My husband was not building an empire. He was building a house of cards, using borrowed money, and setting it on fire. From the outside, we looked wealthy the same way a mannequin looks alive, convincing at a distance, completely hollow up close. My first instinct was to confront him, to demand answers, to scream and cry and force him to explain. But I knew Vincent. If I confronted him, he would manipulate me. He would twist the truth, make me doubt myself, and somehow find a way to blame me. Worse than that, if he knew I was aware of the truth, he might try to take control of my separate money as well. I had always kept something of my own. My grandmother's voice echoed in my head. A woman should have her own money. I still had my retirement account from my years at the law firm. I had rolled it over when I left, but I had never touched it. By then, it had grown to approximately $180,000. It was mine, earned independently, and considered separate property under the law. And then there was my grandmother herself. She passed away when I was 28 and left me $340,000. Her will was explicit. The money was for me alone. I kept it in a separate account for 6 years. I never mixed it with Vincent's finances. I never used it for household expenses. In total, I had about $520,000 that was legally and completely mine. So I did not confront Vincent. Instead, I protected myself. With the help of my uncle, a retired accountant, I created an irrevocable trust for Tyler. My retirement account and my inheritance were placed into that trust. My name was not listed as a beneficiary. Vincent's name was nowhere near it. The money was for Tyler's future. College, a first home, emergencies. It was untouchable. Then I documented everything. Every mortgage, every hidden account, every suspicious transaction. I printed copies and stored them at my sister's house. I placed backups in a safe deposit box. I saved digital copies on an encrypted drive. And then I waited. I knew Vincent would leave eventually. Men like him always do. They grow bored, they find someone younger, or they decide they deserve more. I only needed to be ready when that day came. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of watching him dig the hole deeper. 3 years of smiling at dinner parties while knowing our entire life was built on quicksand. By the time Vincent finally asked for a divorce and demanded the house, the business, the cars, and everything else, I nearly laughed. He was not asking for assets. He was demanding debt. He just did not know it yet. Back in the present, I sat across from Nina Castellano and placed 3 binders on her desk. Inside them was 3 years' worth of evidence. Every mortgage document, every loan statement, every hidden account, every suspicious transaction. She read in silence for nearly an hour. When she finally looked up, her expression had completely changed. She asked how long I had known about all of this. I told her the truth. I had been aware of it for 3 years. I had been waiting for Vincent to leave. I knew he eventually would. And when he demanded everything, he would also be demanding all the debt. Nina leaned back in her chair. The pity in her eyes disappeared. So did the concern. What replaced it was something closer to awe. She confirmed what I already understood. If I signed over all marital assets, I would walk away clean. Vincent would receive the house, the business, the vehicles, and with them, every mortgage, every loan, and every lease obligation. All of it would become his sole responsibility. My inheritance and retirement funds, never commingled and legally protected, were safe inside the trust created for my son. Nina was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled slowly and apologized. She admitted she had believed I had given up. I smiled back. Everyone thought that. That was the point. From that moment on, the trap was already set. The numbers were verified. The documentation was airtight. All that remained was to let Vincent believe he was winning. The next 3 months became an exercise in careful performance. I became exactly what everyone expected me to be. Broken, defeated, barely holding myself together. I attended mediation sessions with red eyes and trembling hands. I spoke softly and hesitantly, like a woman who had lost all confidence. I asked for so little that even the mediator seemed uncomfortable. During the second mediation, I said I only wanted enough money to start over. I explained that I was not trying to be difficult. I acknowledged that the business was Vincent's life's work and that the house meant everything to him. I said I did not want to tear our family apart any further. I requested a settlement of $50,000 in cash, my personal belongings, and shared custody of Tyler. That was all. Vincent agreed immediately. He likely expected me to fight for half of everything, which would have been the reasonable legal approach. Instead, I asked for crumbs. He looked at me with something that resembled pity, as if I were a wounded animal he was generously releasing. I played my role perfectly. With each passing week, Vincent's arrogance grew. He stopped being careful. He stopped pretending to be reasonable. He told anyone who would listen that I had not even tried to fight. He said I simply gave up. He said he offered a fair settlement, and I accepted without protest. His mother was even worse. She boasted at her book club, at church gatherings, and at every social event she attended. She told people that Vincent was keeping everything and that I had not received a single dime. She said she had always known I was not strong enough for her son. To celebrate his perceived victory, Vincent bought himself a new watch for $15,000. I knew because I saw the charge on the business account. He was still using company funds for personal expenses, still digging the hole deeper. He wore the watch to our next mediation session, making sure I noticed it. Around the same time, he took Brittany to dinner at the French restaurant where we had celebrated our 10th anniversary. He posted photos online and wrote that life was good when you are with the right person. The right person, in his mind, was simply the person who did not yet know about his debt. Meanwhile, Brittany began redecorating my former home. New furniture appeared in the living room, new artwork covered the walls. She even repainted my kitchen. She painted it gray. I had spent 3 weeks choosing that sage green color. 3 weeks of testing samples, adjusting lighting, and trying to get it exactly right. She covered it with a generic gray as if it meant nothing. Gray suited her. Gray suited what her future with Vincent would soon become. During this time, Diane continued calling me, pretending to check in while quietly gathering information. I played along without hesitation. I told her I was exhausted. I said I just wanted everything to be over. I said I no longer had the energy to fight. Within hours, Vincent would know. I could almost feel him relaxing, lowering his guard further each time. Diane believed she was manipulating me. In reality, she was functioning as nothing more than a messenger. While the adults were absorbed in their games, Tyler was watching. My son began noticing things that did not make sense. He saw his father's expensive new watch but was told they could not afford his school trip to Washington. He noticed shopping bags piling up in the foyer while hearing constant complaints about money being tight. He saw the contradiction between the image his father projected and the reality he described. One evening, Tyler came to my small apartment and sat across from me at the secondhand kitchen table. He asked me quietly whether his father was actually wealthy. I asked him what he thought. He said something did not feel right. He said his father seemed to be pretending. I squeezed his hand and told him to wait a little longer. A 15-year-old boy recognized the truth before 2 lawyers and a certified accountant ever did. Behind the scenes, Nina was finalizing the legal structure with precision. The main divorce agreement clearly stated that I was relinquishing all claims to marital property. The house, the business, the vehicles, everything would go to Vincent. In exchange, I would receive my modest cash settlement and walk away. Attached to that agreement was an addendum, a detailed liability disclosure statement. It listed every mortgage, every loan, every debt associated with the assets Vincent was claiming. By signing for the assets, he would legally assume full responsibility for all liabilities. It was legal, it was precise, and it was devastating. 2 weeks before the final hearing, Vincent's lawyer contacted Nina with concerns. He explained that his client was assuming significant assets and requested a full financial audit before finalizing the agreement. Nina agreed to provide documentation. But when Vincent was presented with the suggestion, he refused outright. He said he built the company and knew exactly what it was worth. He did not want to pay an accountant to tell him what he already believed. His lawyer warned him, strongly. Vincent cut him off. He wanted the divorce finalized. Brittany wanted it done. There would be no delays. The lawyer, having practiced for decades, recognized what was about to happen. He presented Vincent with a waiver acknowledging that he had recommended an independent financial review and that Vincent was declining against legal advice. Vincent signed it without reading it. He signed it the same way he signed everything else. Impatient, confident, unwilling to read the fine print. The night before the final hearing, Vincent sent me a text message. He thanked me for not making the divorce ugly. I stared at the screen for a long time. 15 years of marriage, 15 years of building his business, raising his son, managing his life, and he was thanking me for being easy while he discarded me. I replied that I only wanted what was best for Tyler. That was true. Tyler's future was already secured. That evening, Nina called to confirm the details. The final hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. The judge assigned to the case was Patricia Holden. She asked me if I was ready. I looked around my small apartment, the secondhand furniture, the unpacked boxes in the corner, the tiny kitchen I had painted sage green because it reminded me of hope. I told her I had been ready for 3 years. Thursday morning arrived. The courtroom was quiet, filled with the sound of papers shuffling and lawyers murmuring to one another. Sunlight filtered through tall windows, reflecting off polished floors worn smooth by decades of footsteps. Vincent arrived first. He was wearing his best suit, the charcoal Armani I had helped him choose years earlier. His new watch caught the light as he shook hands with his lawyer. He looked confident, relaxed, like a man about to close a very favorable deal. Brittany waited outside the courtroom. She was not permitted inside, but she wanted to be close. Lorraine was seated in the gallery, dressed carefully, already looking as though she were planning a celebration afterward. I arrived a few minutes later. I wore a simple navy dress. No jewelry. My hair pulled back neatly. I looked tired, defeated, like a woman who had nothing left to fight for. It was exactly the image everyone expected. Judge Patricia Holden entered the courtroom, and everyone stood. She had spent decades on the family court bench and had seen every manipulation and performance imaginable. She reviewed the file briefly and confirmed that both parties had reached an agreement. Vincent's lawyer stated that his client would assume all marital assets, including the family home, the real estate business, and all associated vehicles. In exchange, I would receive a cash settlement of $50,000. Nina confirmed that I agreed to those terms. The judge turned her attention to me. She studied my face carefully, searching for any sign of coercion or hesitation. She asked whether I understood that I was relinquishing claims to substantial property, including the business I had helped build. I answered calmly that I understood. She asked whether I was entering the agreement voluntarily. I said yes. I told her I simply wanted my husband to have everything he had asked for and for the process to be over. For a moment, the judge hesitated. I could sense her weighing whether to intervene, whether to delay proceedings, whether to protect me from what appeared to be a terrible decision. But I was represented by counsel, and my answers were clear. She approved the agreement and instructed the clerk to distribute the final documents. Page after page was placed in front of us. Vincent signed eagerly, barely glancing at the text. He wanted it finished. He wanted to return to his new life. I signed slowly and deliberately. Across the room, I saw Vincent glance toward his mother and smile. She nodded approvingly. His phone vibrated in his pocket, likely a message of encouragement from Brittany. Meanwhile, his lawyer reviewed the documents one final time. Then he reached the addendum, the liability disclosure statement. I watched his expression change as he read. Confusion crossed his face. He flipped backward, then forward again, hoping he had misunderstood something. He had not. His face drained of color. He leaned toward Vincent and whispered urgently. Vincent brushed him off, still basking in what he believed was his victory. The lawyer insisted. He explained that Vincent was assuming responsibility for all associated debts. That was when Vincent finally looked. I watched his eyes scan the numbers. The mortgages on the house totaling over $1 million. The business debts approaching $500,000. Lease obligations on the vehicles. Additional personal liabilities. The net value of everything he had claimed was negative. Vincent stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He protested, insisting the figures were wrong. He accused me of hiding information and committing fraud. The judge ordered him to sit down. She reviewed the documents herself and addressed him directly. She explained that the liabilities listed were tied to assets in his name and under his control. She asked whether he was claiming ignorance of his own financial situation. There was silence. His lawyer spoke up and informed the court that he had advised Vincent to conduct an independent financial audit prior to finalizing the agreement. He presented the signed waiver confirming that Vincent had declined against legal advice. The judge reviewed the waiver and asked Vincent to confirm that the signature was his. After a long pause, he admitted it was. She explained calmly that he had assumed the risk voluntarily. He had been given the opportunity to verify the information and chose not to. The agreement would stand. Vincent turned toward me, his composure finally cracking. He said that I had known about all of this. I told him the truth. I had been his bookkeeper for 11 years. I knew everything. He asked the judge to allow him to withdraw from the agreement. He claimed he had not understood what he was signing and that it was unfair. The judge refused. She reminded him that he had signed the documents in open court, was represented by competent counsel, and had declined additional review. The liabilities were his. The agreement was final. The gavel came down. The marriage was officially dissolved. I stood, gathered my belongings, and looked at Vincent one last time. He sat slumped in his chair, papers scattered in front of him, his world collapsing around him. I reminded him quietly that he had asked for everything except Tyler. I had given him exactly what he wanted. I walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Behind me, Vincent's voice was already rising. He was shouting at his lawyer, demanding explanations, accusing him of incompetence, insisting that none of this was his fault. His lawyer responded calmly, reminding him that he had advised a full audit and had documented Vincent's refusal in writing. Through the glass doors, I saw Brittany's face change as she listened. I saw her look at Vincent, really look at him, and realize that the successful businessman she believed she was with did not exist. She left before I reached the elevator. Her heels clicked rapidly across the marble floor, and she never looked back. Her exit from my marriage was faster than her entrance. Outside, the April sun was warm. The sky was blue. Somewhere behind me, my ex-husband was unraveling, screaming about fairness and fraud. Ahead of me was a new life. Smaller than before, simpler. but entirely mine. The collapse came faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, Brittany moved out of the house in the middle of the night. She left a short note explaining that this was not what she had signed up for. The gray kitchen sat empty. Within a month, Vincent tried to sell the house. But when you owe more than something is worth, there are no buyers. Only banks calling about missed payments and real estate agents discussing short sales. Within 2 months, the business began to default. Vendors filed lawsuits. Lines of credit were frozen. The company Vincent had spent 15 years bragging about, and the company I had spent 11 years supporting, began to crumble. Within 3 months, Vincent was meeting with bankruptcy attorneys. The man who once spoke confidently about his empire was now calculating which assets could be protected from creditors. The answer was very few. Lorraine's perfect son began calling relatives, asking for loans, offering excuses, rewriting history. No one had known about the debt. She told people I must have hidden it, I must have tricked him. But the documents told a different story. The mortgages were in his name, the loans were in his name, the gambling losses, the cryptocurrency failures, the secret apartment, all of it carried his signature. That year, Lorraine's Christmas newsletter was unusually short. It simply stated that Vincent was exploring new opportunities. About a week after the hearing, Diane called me. Her voice shook as she apologized. She claimed she never knew things were that bad. She insisted she never meant for any of it to happen. I did not respond. Some bridges are not meant to be repaired. Some betrayals do not deserve closure. After 3 unanswered calls, she stopped trying. Lorraine attempted a different approach. She went through Tyler. She asked him to tell me she was sorry, that she did not know about the money problems, that she wanted to talk. Tyler looked at his grandmother, the woman who had packed his mother's belongings into garbage bags and sided against me without question, and told her that his mother was busy building her life and did not have time for excuses. I wanted peace, and I got it. Tyler eventually understood everything, not because I explained it to him, but because he observed it himself. He saw the court documents. He heard his father's explanations. He watched Brittany leave and Lorraine scramble. One evening, about a month after the divorce, he sat with me in our small apartment and said that he realized I had known the truth for 3 years. He understood that I had waited. I told him I needed to be sure he was protected, no matter what happened between his father and me. The trust fund was safe. $520,000, untouched and secure. His future was protected. He was quiet for a moment. Then he hugged me, a real hug. The kind I had not received from my teenage son in months. The kind that said he understood. The kind that said he was proud. My $50,000 settlement went toward rebuilding. First month's rent, security deposit, basic furniture that did not fall apart. It was not luxury, it was stability. The trust remained exactly where it was. I enrolled in interior design courses at a community college, the dream I had set aside years earlier to support Vincent's ambitions. I was finally building something for myself. I started small. My first real client was a woman ending a long marriage. She stood in her empty apartment and asked me how someone starts over. I told her the truth, 1 room at a time, 1 color at a time, 1 day at a time. We painted her kitchen sage green. She cried when she saw it. She said the color felt like new beginnings. About 3 months after the divorce, Vincent appeared at my apartment. I barely recognized him. He had lost weight, not in a healthy way. Dark circles framed his eyes. His suit was wrinkled. His watch was gone. He told me he had not known things were this bad. He admitted he had made mistakes. He said he did not mean for any of it to happen. He asked if we could talk, if maybe we could figure something out. What he wanted was help, after everything. I reminded him calmly that he had asked for everything except Tyler, and that he had received exactly what he wanted. I told him goodbye. I closed the door. He stood in the hallway for 10 minutes. I know because I watched through the peephole while eating ice cream. That night, after Tyler went to bed, I sat in my small living room and looked at my grandmother's photograph. Her recipe box sat beside it. The one thing Lorraine had almost taken, the one thing that mattered most. I thanked my grandmother for teaching me to keep my own money, to know my worth, and to never allow anyone to make me feel small. The apartment was quiet. It was small. It was nothing like the house I had lived in for 15 years. But it was mine. Every color, every piece of furniture, every decision. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I was free.